multiculturalism, in a good sense, begins. In Descartes, I think it's discourse on method, maybe it's the other one, where he says, when I was young, foreign others' ways of life appeared to me strange. But he says, but then it did strike me, what if my own way of life may also appear strange and stupid from their own gaze, and so on. Here it begins, the true multiculturalism, not with tolerance. I'm deeply suspicious of the very term tolerance. You know why? Because it culturalizes conflicts. No, conflicts do not occur because we don't tolerate each other enough. No, conflicts occur because of economic antagonisms, exploitation, political domination, here and there. So my formula is not clash of civilization, but understanding between civilizations. No, my formula of universality is not we are all part of the great human race. My formula of universality is we have our own fights here, they have their fights. Can we bring these fights together? The only universality is the universality of a struggle. The second thing that bothers me with refugees, and I am for them, whatever you want, my God, and I mean it really, like bring them here and so on. We are responsible for them, is what I call humanitarianization. Sorry, but we should be aware that the ultimate solution is not, it's almost self-evident for me to say this, is not to, what, so that all the poverty that we cause in the third world, we will remedy it so that we will take the victims to us. No, the tough questions has to be asked. What is in the global economic system that makes them what they are, and how to change? I think in the long term, the only change is a radical economic change. And you know who said this? Don't be afraid, slowly, slowly, I'm approaching the end. Yeah, it's that, you know Oscar Wilde, a funny guy, in his wonderful essay, The Soul of Man Under Socialism, he has some lines which I think fit perfectly refugees. Here is a quote at the very beginning of this essay. People find themselves surrounded with hideous poverty, hideous ugliness, starvation, and so on. It is inevitable that they should be strongly moved by all this. Accordingly, with admirable, though misdirected intentions, they very seriously and very sentimentally set themselves to the task of remedying, of curing the evils that they see. But their remedies do not cure the disease, they merely prolong it. Indeed, their remedies are part of the disease. They try to solve the problem of poverty, for instance, by keeping the poor alive, or in the case of a very advanced school, by amusing the poor. But this is not a solution, it is an aggravation of the difficulty. The proper aim is to try and reconstruct society on such a basis that poverty will be impossible. And the altruistic virtues have really prevented the carrying out of this aim. Which is why all today's liberal billionaire capitalists repeat this story. You know, we are not alone. What about millions starving them? We have to help them. No, we shouldn't be there. Of course we should do, but we should be more radical. Not helping them, but help ourselves, change the economic system, my God. This is, otherwise it will just be this endless cycle of ruining them, and then through big donators like Bill Gates and so on, helping them. In this sense, I still prefer the term communism. Because, you know, socialism is not a word which divides enough. Everyone is today a socialist, my God. Not only der Führer, Hitler was a national socialist, but Bill Gates and somewhere. If by socialism you mean taking care of the poor, trying to make the world a better place with more solidarity, then I am a everyone is a socialist today. It just means, you know, like, or as Otto Weininger, you know, Geschlecht und Charakter, he said beautifully, he said, socialism is Aryan, communism is Jewish. I agree with him, and that's for me the case. although I'm not a Jew, for the case for communism. So let me just conclude slowly. In welchem Sinne? Ja, im Sinne der tieferen, okay.
In the sense of bitter necessity.
This is why I'm also tired by this Habermasian motive of deploring the democratic deficit of the European Union. The idea is European Union is basically okay, but it has a democratic deficit. This reminds me of some of my communist friends from my youth who said Soviet Union is still okay, they just have a little bit of a democratic deficit, you know. It's ridiculous. The point is, democratic deficit was a necessary part of their system. And my conclusion here is the one, I'm not pleading for any totalitarian party rule, but precisely in democracy is for me the same problematic term as socialism. Of course, in some sense, I'm for it. Who is not? But it is a word which does not allow us to make the right critical division. You know, there are good things happening under the name of democracy. There are horrible things, military intervention and so on, happening in the name of democracy. What do I mean by this? Maybe some of you know the story. I gave an interview some 2-3 weeks ago to Süddeutsche Zeitung, and then additionally they asked me 6-7 questions of readers, and the question which provoked the greatest echo, hundreds of readers replying to it, was the question, democracy, yes, but who gave Angela Merkel the right to invite refugees to come here? Did she ask the German people for permission? Where is democratic legitimization here? I am here, of course, for Angela Merkel. But I'm saying, and this is something very tough to accept for the standard leftist, I'm saying we shouldn't fetishize democracy. Don't be afraid, not in the sense we need some Stalinist leader to tell us what, but we have brutally to accept that people can be wrong. They can be radically wrong. You know, there is no guarantee. We have to fight. It's not that ordinary, so-called ordinary people and political elite even more are somehow, they know the truth, we just have to help them to get rid of ideological mystifications and so on and so on. It's a tough, serious struggle. The next problem for me, apropos democracy, is that it's the ultimate fetish in our societies. Fetish in the strict Freudian sense. You know what Freud means by fetish? In a naive way. The last thing before you see castration, no? Isn't democracy the last thing we see before we have to confront some radical social antagonism? Like every liberal, we admit to you, yeah, we live in society of struggles and so on, but we have democracy. This is why, incidentally, I hate films like President's Man or Pelican Brief, so-called Hollywood left, where the story appears leftist, like, you know, an ordinary journalist or whatever discovers a great corruption where even the President of the United States is involved, and at the end, the President has to step down. But why are these films ideological? Precisely because they too naively believe in the efficiency of democracy. Why are you so satisfied after seeing such a film? Because basically the message is, but my God, what a great country America is. When two ordinary guys like you and me can overthrow the mightiest man in the world, and so on and so on. You see, this is for me the problem, and please don't misunderstand me. The solution is not that we need some enlightened dictatorship or whatever, but what is the solution? Haha, now I'm concluding with your Leninist question, and then, you know, I think the battle is not lost. You know why? Because the global system, capitalist, is inconsistent. It has all the time, it has to break its own rules. What in one part of the world it's considered commonly accepted, in another part it's intolerable. For example, in United States, that's why I still have a little bit of a soft spot even for Obama. Although it was ultimately a failure, his universal healthcare reform, but by promoting universal healthcare, he obviously disturbed an extremely sensitive point. You know that. Republicans brought him to Supreme Court and so on and so on. So in United States, the universal healthcare, actual healthcare, universalized, is what I call the point of the impossible. Something that appears just a modest point. In Canada, they have it, we can do it. No, you cannot do it without triggering a deep change of the system. You know, it's a little bit like my last example from cinema. You know, I like this motive in science fiction films where when you are in a room and by mistake you press a button. You think this is glass, whatever, light, water, but then by pressing that button, walls start to fall apart, you know, like the whole universe is ruined. And that's the art of politics. In different countries, you have different points of the impossible. In some countries, it can even be human rights. For example, in Turkey, you know what is Turkey? It's the country which now officially is demanding for ISIS, for the Islamic State to be recognized, legalized, and so on and so on. So much about that. But what I'm saying is that, and of course, it's the same time the greatest American ally there, it's exactly the same as Saudi Arabia. No? But what I want to say is that that should be the art of politics. Not great revolution. This is such a comfortable position. Specific points for which you can be sure that points which are in themselves totally acceptable. Like, nobody can accuse you of communist revolution if you demand universal health care in America. And you can always say, but in Europe they have it, in Canada they have it. Or another example, another struggle like this. Did you notice something extremely sad? That in the last decades we have a growth of de facto slavery. That is to say, I claim that capitalism is more and more approaching a state where it will not be able to maintain even the human rights, democratic rights that we are used to. What is happening de facto now in Arab countries, I mean in those wealthy countries, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and so on, they are not called slaves, but they have hundreds of thousands of de facto slaves. We have them even in Europe. It was a wonderful, terrifying news. You remember some 3 years ago, there was a fire in a suburb of Firenze, a small wooden hut burned down and 17 Chinese workers burned to death. And then they discovered there are 15,000, just in that small city, Chinese workers who totally illegal, living in de facto slavery, and so on and so on. So, you know, we can be fighting all these struggles. I am for, why do I believe in relative efficiency of these struggles? I remember from my youth, when I was not a great dissident, but kind of a modest dissident. And I learned this, at least in the last decade of communism, when nobody took it seriously as an ideology. If you were a philosopher and wrote a book decrying communism as worse than fascism and whatever, Marx, origin of Stalinist gulag, no problem. They, by they I mean communists in power, the regime, they paid you a ticket to visit a Western anti-communist conference. But if you made just a specific, precise, local, very particular demand, for example, covering some article in penal code, like we cannot have these verbal delicts like that. It was, and you were even able to justify it in the terms of the ruling ideology. It was much more risky to demand this small change than the big thing. And friends from China are telling me it's more or less the same there now. Yes, you can be liberal, nobody cares. You make a specific demand against ecology, workers' rights, whatever, you are finished. And the very last, I promise you, here it is, point, the very pessimist, sad conclusion. I recently read memoirs by Ruth Klüger. This was a German girl who survived, Jewish, who survived Auschwitz, and then as a small girl, and then after the war, something horrible happened to her. She visited Israel, where she met a Hungarian Jew who was highly educated and also survived Auschwitz. But there when they met some Arabs, Palestinians, this Hungarian Jew, although he survived Auschwitz, he had the number statute, he exploded into hate speech, those dirty Arabs, we should throw them all out, and so on and so on. And she was first shocked. Her reaction was, my God, but he saw real suffering. He saw what racism is. How could he be saying that? And then, and this is maybe the saddest lesson of all these ethnic hatreds, then the truth hit her. You know, Auschwitz was not only a physical catastrophe. Auschwitz was not some kind of a educational community where if you survived it, you saw suffering, you gained some deeper truth, solidarity. No. Auschwitz ruined you also ethically. Don't idealize the victims.